Hey, BookTube, happy Friday. Welcome back to Barter Hordes. My name is Robert. It is a cold, rainy, miserable day in North Carolina. Actually, it's been a cold, rainy, miserable week in North Carolina, much like the rest of the country. We're having some weird weather right now. Perfect weather to stay inside, as if I needed another excuse not to go outside. It's been kind of a strange week. I mentioned last week that I was interviewing for a job, and I decided to not go that route. It was another speech and debate coaching job, and it was actually a terrific position at a terrific program at a terrific school. Everything about it was just right. If I were going to come out of coaching and teaching retirement, that would have been the kind of place that I would love to have gone to. But I'm not ready to put myself at risk yet. And even though that particular school is doing almost everything imaginable to keep people safe, they've still had, some 50 cases of COVID on their campus over the last year. And while that's not a lot, for somebody like me, it just takes one mistake. And I'm in a position that's really dangerous. And so I decided to take my name out of the hat for that position. Who knows? Maybe in the future, if that position is still available, I'll talk to them again. But for right now, it just was not a wise decision for me personally. And so I'm going to remain retired, unemployed, whatever you want to call it. Continue working on the BookTube Prize. Continue telling myself that eventually I'm going to write a book. But I've been telling myself that for so many years now that I'm beginning to wonder if I'm just living in a fantasy. And it's just been a depressing week in some ways because of the weather, because of the kind of ups and downs of being recruited for a job and then deciding that it's ultimately not the right job for me, and just things that I've seen online, the impeachment trial, everything. I'm just really frustrated with people right now. The stuff that I see on Twitter, even on book Twitter, just makes me wonder if any of that crap is worth it anymore. Is being online really worth the time anymore? Especially Twitter. Twitter makes me exponentially more unhappy than it can ever make me happy. So why I ever go on there, I need my head examined. It's not as bad on Instagram, as long as you stay away from the stupid reels. So I'm still on Instagram, and of course I'm still on YouTube, but I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube outside of my bookish friends community. And so, because I know it's a cesspool as well, and so I'm staying away from that. It's a little easier to control on YouTube than it is on Twitter. So it's just been kind of a blah, unhappy week. In good news, my health is good. My last doctor's checkup, my A1C was back under 7 for the first time in a while. So the exercise is working. The diet changes are working. The readjustment of my medication has finally stabilized, and that seems to be doing okay now. So I'm happy about a lot of things like that, but it still hasn't felt like a very good week. I did, however, finish 3 books. So let's talk about something positive. The first book I finished is a 2020 novel, The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. Most people remember that she wrote the wildly successful novel Station 11. I was in a bit of a minority that I really liked Station 11, but I was not in love with that book like so many people were. And so I didn't know what to expect from this one. I had not read any of the information or synopses of The Glass Hotel, so I really did not know what the story was about when I picked it up. And I really did enjoy it. It's a very strange story. It's kind of hard to describe because you're not really sure whose story it is. And maybe that's part of the plan. It is loosely centered around a recreation of the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme story. where a guy takes in, billions in investors, and when the market starts to collapse in the late 2008 2009 period, the Ponzi scheme collapses with it, and it all comes to light. And it reminded me a little bit of the whole joy so many people seem to have over the whole GameStop issue, where GameStop was taking down the hedge funds. Now, I am not ever going to be an apologist for the hedge funds. I think for the most part, they do more harm than good to the market stability. But what a lot of people overlook is who's invested in the hedge funds. And a lot of the clients are big institutional accounts like teachers' retirement plans, university retirement plans. Those are the people who took the real losses. The hedge fund managers lost some pride maybe, but they didn't lose their life savings necessarily. And so I was a little less gleeful over a bunch of ragtag investors on Reddit taking down the man, because I think it's a bigger story than that and a much more complicated story than that. I think we need definite market reforms because I think the hedge fund industry is not regulated nearly enough. And in fact, the way hedge funds are compensated almost encourages them to be extreme risk takers rather than looking out for their clients' best interests. But that's a whole different topic. I could write a book on that. In fact, I've written a part of a book on that. But anyway, The Glass Hotel is about that topic and the people that it affects directly and indirectly. And I found it was really a fascinating read. It reads very quickly. Maybe it's because I just enjoyed it. It read quickly for me. But I like this one better than Station 11. And everybody else seems to love Station 11, so I suspect a lot of people are going to like this one too. So that one I recommend, The Glass Hotel. The second book I finished was one I've been reading off and on in short spurts for a long time. It's nothing unusual. It was The History of Korea by Kyung Hwang that I was reading. This is a relatively brief history book. It breaks down in relatively brief chapters. Each chapter is about 9 or 10 densely packed pages. But it covers everything from about the 7th century to the 21st century. And so it covers a huge swath of Korean history. So it can't do it in a lot of narrative detail. It's mostly names and political alliances, and it got a little dry and a little tedious for me. But it still gave me an overview of some of Korea's history that I know nothing about, which was really helpful for me because I was trying to focus on one aspect of Korean history and my own interests, and I didn't see how that related to the rest of Korean history as well. So this book was good for that, and it has a really good bibliography in the back, which led me to some other titles that I want to pursue next, which is the whole point of reading in history, is it pushes you to new topics. So I'm glad to have that one behind me. Then the third one I finished is another 2020 novel, one that not too many people on BookTube talked about. It's called BarnEight by Deb Olin Unferth, and it's a quirky book. It's a very, very weird premise, and so I'll explain the premise to you and then talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. The book begins with a 15-year-old girl named Jeanine who has grown up in New York with only a mother. Excuse me. Her mother has always told her that her father was just a sperm bank donor. Well, turns out that that was a lie. And on her 15th birthday, Janie's mother explains to her that she has a real father, that he lives in Iowa, and that she didn't really want to have anything to do with him. It was just a mistake in her youth, and she didn't want him in her life. But Janie, being 15 years old, is furious that she's been lied to for so long, and so she runs away from home to go to Iowa. She gets on a bus to meet her father. And when she arrives, she realizes within minutes that this was a mistake because he doesn't want her. He's known about her since she was born, and he didn't want to be a part of her life either. And then she is too proud to admit that she's made a mistake, so she kind of stays there. And this is only a relative minor spoiler because it happens very, very early in the book. But while she's in Iowa with her father, her mother's killed in an auto accident. So she has no reason to go back to New York. She's stuck in Iowa. And so for the next 5 or 6 years, she's angry. She's stuck in Iowa. She doesn't really know what she's going to do. Finally, her father convinces her to take a job with a friend of a friend who is an auditor in the egg industry, the hen laying industry, which is huge in Iowa, of course. And we're talking about massive barns. We're not talking about 7 chickens in the backyard. We're talking about 7, 8, 9 barns on a medium-sized farm, and each barn holds 150,000 chickens, laying hens. And so it's an industrial complex. And so Janie takes the job, doesn't like the job, but then one night she catches her supervisor, who is as straight-laced as can be and by the book, stealing hens from one of the places that they audit. And it opens up a whole new world. And Janie and her boss end up as organizers in one of the largest animal thefts you can imagine. And it's kind of ridiculous. It's funny at times. It's also maddening at times. It's kind of like Upton Sinclair's Jungle without being so serious all the time, except this is about the hen laying industry rather than the meat packing industry in Chicago. It is what I didn't like about it at times. It's a little preachy, a little bit too much like an essay. And then when you get to the end and read the after material, you realize that part of this grew out of an essay that the author wrote about this industry. So it makes sense that some of that has crept into the book as well. But overall, it reads very quickly. It's not a very long novel. It is funny at times. It's quirky. It's a tremendously odd premise. And I really, in the end, I really liked it in its weird little bizarre way. So it's a good read. What am I reading right now? What am I reading this weekend? I am in the middle of, or just slightly more than halfway through, 2 different books. I mentioned to you last week that I was starting the massive Mozart biography by Jan Swafford. I am over the halfway point in that, and I'll talk about it more. Being a classical musician, classical music lover for almost my entire life, I'm finding it very interesting. There's some things about it that I'm not in love with, but I'm really glad I'm reading it because, as I mentioned last week, one of Swafford's goals is to set the record straight and wipe away some of the mythology surrounding Mozart's life and talk about what actually really happened. And then the other one that I'm just over the halfway mark on is Jeanine Cummins' American Dirt. So 1 fiction, 1 nonfiction. I will probably have both of those finished by next Friday, so I'll be able to talk about them in detail next Friday. I'm not sure I'll have anything else finished besides those 2 because Mozart's 750 pages and American Dirt is nearly 400 pages. And so they're both going to take up a little bit of my time. So what else is going on? I mentioned to you that my health is decent. Part of that is because on January 1st, I got back on my bike after being off for several months, trying again to heal a back injury. And through January, I cycled every day except for 1 day in the month of January. I still had a little bit of back pain off and on the first couple of weeks, but I just realized a couple of days ago that it's now the middle of February and I haven't had back pain in about a month now. My back seems to be completely healed, which is just glorious. I was to the point where I couldn't get out of bed without having back spasms for a while, and that was just awful. I'm cycling almost every day. I think I've taken 2 days off in the last 6 weeks since I started riding again, just to let my legs recover a little bit when they started feeling a little bit dead. I've been riding almost exclusively indoors because the weather's been so crappy, and I'm not anxious to get out in traffic, to be honest. And so I don't have a Peloton at home. I have the ProForm Tour de France model. And I got it because it's powered by Google Maps. So rather than like going to a spin class and having a cycle instructor, guiding you through a workout and cheering you on and chastising you into do more, that didn't interest me much. I like the idea of being able to ride any set of roads anywhere in the world powered via Google Maps And while I'm doing it, the bike automatically adjusts for the gradient up and down on the hills, which I think is really cool. So I'm constantly having to adjust the gear that I'm in because all of a sudden, I go from a flat to a 10% incline, and you can't do that in a big gear. At least I can't. And so it's really been good. It's been challenging in terms of doing different types of riding. And you get to see all the Google Maps, the Google Road or whatever it is, sequence of pictures while you're going through that particular route. Some of them are more entertaining than others. I did one that was down in Key West, or in the Keys, and you're just looking at strip malls for the entire 8 miles, which wasn't very exciting. But that's what that is. I've driven that road before, and that's what it looks like. And so that's been a lot of fun. I've been doing different rides from around the world every day on that. And I'm doing 2 virtual rides right now. Every year, North Carolina's Department of Transportation sponsors a ride, an actual physical ride called Blue Ridge to the Beach, where they start somewhere in the mountains in the west of the state. And then over the course of 9, 10, I don't know, 2 weeks, they ride to the beach somewhere down around the Wilmington area. But now they're doing it virtually in different waves throughout the year because of the pandemic. And so I decided, since I'd never been able to do it in person because I was always in school during that ride, it usually takes place in October, I decided to do it virtually. And so I've been doing that one, and I'm now about 85% of the way finished with that one. That's just a 2-month challenge. So I just gone through Fayetteville, North Carolina, on my way down to Wilmington, and then the final little spur over to the beach itself. And so I'm almost done with that one. And then I'm doing a much longer one that's over the course of 12 months, and that is riding Route 66 from Chicago, Illinois to Santa Monica or LA over the course of a year. It's 2,280 miles the way they've calculated it. And while I'm not riding the actual roads on my bike, you just turn in your mileage that you rode that day wherever you rode it, and then it keeps your progress. And I just passed the 20% mark on that one. So I'm getting close to the end of my time in Missouri, and then I'll zip across the very tip, the southwest tip of Kansas, and then my next state would be Oklahoma. So I'm enjoying that one. They give you a pace car that tells you where you should be on any given day. And I was behind that pace car for a long time, but now my mileage is built up where I don't know, 30 or 40 miles ahead of the pace car now. So I feel good about that challenge too. And that's been a lot of fun. So my cycling has been going very well. If you follow me on Instagram, I usually post something every day in my Instagram stories about what I rode that day. My Kdrama is continuing. I told you last week that we started watching one in my Kdrama it's not my group, the Kdrama appreciation group that I am in. We started watching one called Startup on Netflix, which is a relatively new drama. 16 episodes, which is typical of K-dramas. The episodes on this one are a little bit longer than usual. These are about an hour and 20 minutes each. Most of them try to keep it to an hour. But this one, you don't really notice that it's an hour and 20 minutes. It's pretty compelling. We've all been loving this one. We are now through episode 10. Today will be episode 11. So we've reached the point now where we've hit the low point emotionally for some of the crises. And we're going to start to see how they begin to resolve them. It's about a startup incubator called Sandbox, in Seoul, of course. And there's a big competition for people who want to start up companies, and they end up taking 5 companies into their annual cohort. And 2 of the 5 companies just happen to be run by sisters who are somewhat estranged going back to their childhood. Their parents separated. One lived with the father, one lived with the mother, and they basically stopped being sisters for a long time. But there's business and technology sprinkled throughout this. There is a love triangle that's going on. There is a revenge story that's just now starting to display some of its elements, which I think will probably dominate some of the second half of the drama. It's been really good, though. Oh, and it's got the most wonderful, adorable grandma in history. So If you like K-dramas, this is one you definitely will want to check out if you have Netflix. It's called Startup. And then finally, in terms of music, while I've been reading the Mozart biography, I've been listening to a lot of Mozart recordings. And I finally, just a couple of days ago, instead of trying to find individual recordings every 30 or 40 minutes, I just turned on Apple Music's Mozart Essentials playlist and just let that run in the background. And it does a little bit of everything. You've got some of his piano concertos, some of his symphonies, some of his chamber music, some of his operas. So a little bit of everything. And of course, it ends up, I believe, with the Mozart Requiem, which is his greatest sacred work. So that's what I've been listening to in the background while I've been reading and so on. Other than that, everything is just proceeding as it has. I'm going to stay home again in 2021. I am in group 4 for vaccines in North Carolina. I was in group 2A in the first iteration of the plans. And then when they reshuffled the guidance, I suddenly moved from group 2A to group 4. So I won't be seeing a vaccine until summer, I imagine, at the earliest. They said they're about to start vaccinating group 3, but they also admitted that they haven't even vaccinated half of group 2 yet because they just haven't had the supply of vaccine. So it's not going to happen for me for a while. So to stay safe, I will keep riding my bike at home and keep locked up like I have been. I hope you all are staying safe. I am becoming more and more discouraged watching people on Instagram going to restaurants and bars, just completely ignoring the fact that people are at risk. The South African variant just showed up this week in North Carolina, so another twist in the tale. Lots of reasons to be careful, people. I know it's been a year, but I'd like to have many more years. I'm willing to give up another year if that's what it takes so I can live longer than that. I hope everybody else is too. Be safe, be smart. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.